Sure. All right, well, let's get going. People are still piling in, but I thought I'd just start off. Hey, so thanks. Really grateful to have you guys here. And I'm sure, it just feels like this thing's kind of dragging on and on. And, I'm sure everybody's kind of going through their own things. For me today, my two sons are graduating high school. Whoa, wait a second. Balaji, let's check out the hairdo. This is like,
Oh,
look
I'm
at that
surprised
thing,
nobody else
man.
has a quarantine accident hairdo. Come on, guys.
That is amazing.
you look like 10 years younger.
I'm glad you got the Floby I sent you, Balaji.
Yeah, there you go.
My wife told me that you tried to look like Jeremy Meeks. You know who that is? He's the hot convict that came out like 2 years back, got super popular.
Oh, right.
From his
Exactly.
mugshot.
Exactly.
You look just like him.
Yeah, and she's like,
Yeah,
that's what you were
totally.
going for. You didn't look anything close to that, buddy. So,
That's
live with what you get.
awesome, man. You're looking like me.
Hot
You and I are
convict
brothers
look.
now. Hot convict look. You need that little. I think that didn't he have a little tattoo on his face?
Oh,
Like
he also
did a little
had
tattoo right here, like a tear.
He also had gray blue eyes, so I can't fake that. No.
Put the
You get
contacts
some
and a
contact.
Sharpie and you'll be all set.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, great. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Welcome. Hey, I don't know if you guys got a chance to read that article from Andreessen Horowitz on, COVID-19 and the great rehiring. I got really excited because I think there's and also felt a huge sense of responsibility that, we're part of the solution to that, right? Like if it's gone from 3 million people that are unemployed to 30 million people unemployed. And as that article talked about, in 2018, it took 38 days to hire somebody into that on average in the US. I mean, obviously if we're going to get people back to work, we've got to really work together to cut that time down and take friction out of the system. And I think, a lot of us in this marketplace are perfectly positioned to do that. So, it really reminded me, Balaji, of, so Balaji and I worked on a Deloitte Pixel case study with Mike Tushman. Mike and I and Carrie Herman wrote it, and Balaji is part of the, one of the subjects. And it seems like that's part of the equation that you guys solve for at Experify, right? Is like the amount of time it took Deloitte to hire data scientists pre-Experify, and then trying to shorten that time, try to take the friction out of it. So I think there's a lot to talk about there. And I think, I've been thinking about it in the context of, and Mike Morris and I had a great conversation last week, it seems like when anything new happens, and this is, this whole open talent thing's been happening, been in kind of the early adoption phase for a long, long time, right? It's like most participants need to kind of be everything to everybody, right? Need to provide a lot because there's no one singular niche that's big enough to really lean into and verticalize and provide that. And that works really well in kind of the, adoption fast, slash early adoption, or sorry, the innovator slash early adoption part of the diffusion curve, because, customers are really savvy. They're really creative. They can take those tools and apply those kind of general tools to their specific problems, and they can do that themselves. But as I see, especially as we see the pressure of this kind of great rehiring that will happen sooner or later, we're crossing this chasm, right? We're crossing this chasm from really sophisticated, early adopted buyers that can do the heavy lifting of applying our tools and our philosophy into their organizations. And this next phase is going to be kind of early majority, where there's that really, better verticalization. We need to be able to build and understand how to market our services and the overall industry in a way that's easier to buy. I mean, Dean, I thought your story last time about AWS was super inspiring, that analyzing the marketplace to understand that AWS, is a hot area, that there's demand, and then how do you help your community, get qualified, get certified to do that. So that's kind of where I want to talk today. And obviously, I think there's some things to talk about in verticalization, but I think also it's like, how do we market ourselves? How do we think about ourselves as a group and be a part of the solution for where the world is today? So today is going to be a little bit different format, in that I didn't plan on calling a bunch of people, so I'd love to get it, a little bit more lively. So I think, but to start, I wanted Jin to kind of report in on what's happening at the lab and what you guys are doing and what you guys are thinking. How's everything going on campus, Jin?
Hey, everyone. Good to see you. Things are going good again. You know, Boston's a bit of a bit of a mess in terms of our timing and whatnot. And again, the universities are trying to figure out what the next step is. But I had a really interesting tidbit to share with you. You know, we've been involved in the online space for quite some time, developed some online courses. And then, you know, we have, you know, Kareem runs his Harvard Business Analytics program, which is sort of our, I'd like to say it's an alternative to an MBA for executives. It's really good. I've actually taken it, so it's 9 months. But of the products we've developed, we have a technology entrepreneurship course that we've run. Last one we had 500 participants. This run we've got 30,000. 30,000 people have signed up to take this, geographically dispersed, and lots of really interesting discussion, people wanting to do pitches and things of that nature. Again, this is to help figure out, you know, where innovation plays in the entrepreneurship space, and how do you identify opportunities, and thinking through decomposing problems, all sort of our wheelhouse of research we've done, but baked into this curriculum. Which is fantastic. And then again, 30,000, you know, what does that really mean? And but we have some good metrics on it. Just last week alone, close to 9,000 active learners. So they're doing something on this. And close to 4,500 people watched videos, right? So we've got a lot of eyes on this. And then about 2,200 tried a problem. So we have problem sets and things like that. So, and then close to 1,000 in discussion on the discussion board. So this is like rapidly kicking up. There's all sorts of other technology courses. This is run through Harvard X, by the way, which is a subcomponent of edX, free classes. But people are really building their skill this way. You know, they want to spend their time wisely. And I was shocked again when we ran this, you know, reasonably. My expectations were, you know, if we had 500 last time, maybe we'll have 700. It just coincidentally happened with COVID and this shock. So I think more people are aware. I think more people are just aware that digital technology is not going away, and that digital transformation is happening as we speak. And there's rapid opportunities to identify gaps in market areas where people aren't addressing it. So this is one signaling, in my opinion, of how people are thinking about opportunities. Certainly there's entrepreneurs on this call. I know some of you, and how we think about it. So even again, in parallel with some of the work and the gig stuff, it's interesting to think of this as organizing communities in efficient ways, and where people want to invest their time and knowledge into. Upskilling is huge, and this is one component of, I think, how people are thinking about, you know, how they're using this to spin up their own ideas, or at least just, you know, start to think about where the technological development is going to come from, especially as, you know, things like AR, VR, IoT, AI certainly is powering it all, machine learning, and then you know, even some of the currently existing, you know, digital technologies as they come to an end, and there's new generations of it, especially with 5G around the corner. You know, how do we think about that? So lots of energy and momentum in this space. I think lots of learning. I'd encourage you. It's a pretty easy 5-section course. If you haven't done it, certainly do it. I think you can get through it pretty quickly. It's self-paced. But again, I think, you know, there's a lot of knowledge to be shared in these areas. So I would encourage everybody to start investing in you know, learning, and then figuring out, you know, where the gaps are in market. And I think more of what we're seeing too is in terms of the entrepreneur spaces. I think the days of, yeah, first the market's always important and whatnot, but having the right partnerships is going to be crucial. So I think a lot of people are looking for different types of guidance and experience. And again, I think, you know, leveraging your networks to do that, along with, you know, ramping up your game to get good at this is really really key to this sort of stuff. So that's sort of been my learning the last couple of weeks. Again, just completely shocked, below my expectations, and I do think this will be a bit more of a trend as we go. It's not just because of again, the COVID shock. I think and people are home. I do think that the learning, a lot of learning, is going to happen very quickly, and it's going to be happening in these sort of digestible formats.
Sorry,
I think you're on mute.
I was on mute there. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. That was really great. Amazing progress on those things. I know Cream and I talked about that just in the context of his HBAP program too, before COVID. So, you know, and it really plays in. John Healy, you and I were talking yesterday about Galloway's article, you know, and I think this is exactly the way that he envisioned it playing out. So awesome. Well, hey, before we get going and having a broader discussion today, I'm going to be, like I said, make it a little bit more open-ended. But hey, Ray, you want to lead us through a really quick like breakout? We're going to do kind of a one-on-one breakout to continue that kind of intimacy. So red, yellow, green. You're on mute there, Ray.
Yeah, let me unmute myself. Yeah, so we'll do a quick red, yellow, green check-in again, where we'll all go into breakout rooms for a couple of minutes. And the idea here is to check in with whoever you end up with. Take about 2 minutes each to one person speaks, the other person listens, and then we'll switch. And we like to use red, yellow, green just because it's an easy one to remember, where red is, you know, I got a lot of stuff going on. I'm really triggered. I'm, you know, coming in hot. Green is I'm totally present, got a lot of flow happening. Yellow is somewhere in between, and you can be lime green, you can be mellow yellow, you can be green all the way, whatever. So why don't we break out and see, do a quick check-in.
That was super fun. Thanks, Chad, for chatting. Really great. Hey, Sajid, nice to have you on the call. Hey, Mike, how's it going? Great. So, well, I thought, you know, I hope that was good for everybody. And I always really enjoy that, getting to know people a little bit better. That was really awesome. So I thought today we'd kind of kick into that, you know, like the article, and I threw out this question, and certainly can be modified, but these people, I guess, are still piling into the room from our chats. Boom, boom, boom. We'll wait a couple seconds as they do that. So I hope everybody, that was a good experience for everybody. Hey, Gavin, you're making my son jealous because that Supreme hat. That's a valuable hat, man. You can hot on the reseller market.
I'll keep it hidden.
Looks like, yeah, there you go. Yeah, for sure. All right, looks like everybody's back. So I kind of threw out the question and wanted to have kind of a bigger discussion today about how can we work together to help organizations adopt the open talent models. And some of it's alignment and strategy, obviously, but also creating a more consistent marketing message from all of us as a community to make it easier to adopt these tools. And so I thought we'd kick off just a conversation. And one of my favorite people in kind of the world of strategy and big thinking and marketing is Ty Montague. And Ty, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah, great. Well, Ty and I actually have known each other for a really long time. And when I was launching Victors and Spoils, he was launching Co-Collective. He had the wisdom to kind of keep going himself, and instead of me, bailing and then blowing things up, at Havas. But no,
I don't know who was wiser. I'm really not.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think one of the things, so that was back in 2008, 2009, I guess. Yeah. And both of us had this vision of using kind of open platforms to do marketing work. And so we compared a lot of notes back then. And, Ty, I'd love for you just to riff on, how can we communicate and that, in a way that we can help kind of this, great rehiring or restructuring when it happens. I mean, any thoughts from a journeyman that's not only used the tools, but also tried to build tools and talked to a lot of clients about stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think about how to help people navigate change a lot, because that's the sort of business that we're in at Co. And I think, without getting overly deep and philosophical, I really believe that the resistance to change is it's part of our DNA. It's really baked into us at a deep level. Because when we, as a species, when we discover something that works, right? It's the ones that stick with it that pass their genes down. The ones that move on to the next new thing don't pass their genes down as successfully, or at least they haven't in the past. And so as a species, we've adopted the kind of behavior that would suggest that doing, sticking with the tried and true versus the new is the way to go. And that works right up until the point that it doesn't work anymore, and it's why I really like the concept of dynamic equilibrium in like, as you think about evolutionary theory, that evolution doesn't happen in these nice, neat, smooth curves. Evolution happens in these big kind of leaps that are driven by shocking moments of change. The world doesn't evolve in a smooth way, and it doesn't evolve until it is forced to by change. And so I think we're in one of those times right now, right? We're in one of those times when everything is changing around us, driven, partially by pandemic, but also partially other well-covered forces like climate change, where, I don't know, the inner workings of capitalism itself are being, questioned and being rewired. And so I think it's a tremendous opportunity for this group and the work that all of us are engaged in. I think that in terms of helping to hasten the transition from early adoption, as you said, John, to crossing the chasm, I just think we have to make it a little bit easier for people to adopt new behaviors, right? There's still a lot of friction in the open platform space. You have to be curious, you have to want to learn, you have to do a bunch of research, you have to, like Balaji is the expert here, like figuring out what works and what doesn't work, so that you can then be a kind of translator or evangelist within your own organization for how to do this. And I think there's a huge opportunity to create a set of tools to help those early adopters then take the knowledge that they've gained and transmit it through their organizations. I think that, helping to make that process easier will help ease, organizations on the path that is, I would say, existentially necessary at this point. I think companies that don't adopt new ways of operating are not going to be around for very long. So
yeah, that's great.
I'll pause there.
Thanks, Ty. I think that's really interesting. I totally agree that, evolution doesn't happen in a linear fashion, and it is, this is the moment, right? And I think, the thing that I get really excited about is I think we've been, mucking around in our labs and in the kind of the innovation phase of things, trying to figure this out, and it obviously, know that these things work, and now it's time to kind of use those to help the rest of the world, right? Like, how do we use these things to help organizations and help people get back to work and create that kind of momentum? I was just kind of riffing this morning. Hey, Paul Estes, are you on? I saw you there for a sec. I actually just got the copy of your book, so congrats. Nice to have a nice hard copy. But I saw you on there. Are you? You wrote this book called Gig Mindset about adoption inside things. We'll send a link, actually. I think put it in there. But can you?
In fairness, John, I wrote it in partnership with some wonderful people on this call. I see Mr. Steve Rader, who is in the book. I see Mr. John Windsor, who is also in the book. I think Diana's here. She's also in the book. So while I feel very honored that you mentioned the book, it was written with expertise of actually a lot of people that participate in Open Assembly and the work that you do. And I was equally as inspired. That's the book, and I'm working on some others. So it's this group that I'm trying to evangelize for.
That's awesome. What do you see in like I don't know if you got a chance to read the article on the great rehiring or comment maybe on some of the thoughts that that Ty laid out on, you know, what it takes to adopt things.
It's interesting to me. I was fortunate at my breakout session. It was kind of like Russian roulette. I don't know if that's a bad analogy, but I got Balaji. So that was fascinating. And so I was talking to Balaji, and I think that he was talking about an idea that it resonates very much with me, that, you know, companies should hire people as freelancers. This idea of you know, we've broken down the barrier of remote. And now I think, and so I'm talking less about remote now in the presentations I give, and more about, you know, as Dean Bashi would say, you know, destroying the organizational chart. I think the next thing that we all need to rail against is the idea that the organizational chart is actually a limiting factor. And so I'm writing an article, The Day I Realized I Was Living in a Box, is an article I'm writing to get published in Fast Company. And, you know, the last 3 years of my career, they couldn't give me a job title. And it stressed the company out. Like, the company woke up every day, they're like, we don't know what to call you. What's your job title? I'm like, I don't know, call me Paul, whatever. I don't like, and it stressed them out. Like, HR would come and like, well, we need a title to put in the box. And so I'm trying to educate, you know, as we all here believe that there is a world full of humans that have skills that can be applied to organizations, in diversity is an empowering and an amazing thing. We need to educate organizations that the structure that they have, the boxes, the PowerPoint with the boxes and the titles and everything, are actually a limiting and dated way to look at the world. And so that's a lot of the content I'm going to be doing over the next 6 months, because I think, you know, I saw in Fiverr's earnings report, they have a chart. And it's, you know, a chart that shows COVID happened and more people hired freelancers. I've interviewed people, all the CEOs from a lot of the remote first companies, whether it's Mural or a number of different Time Saved and a number of others. And they're all seeing significant increases in demand, Prezi, significant increases in demand for their products. And so, you know, I think, Ty, when you said, you know, structural change is happening. You know, people are not going back. And I think it bodes well for the work that everyone on this call is doing. And I think it's important that we all lean in and speak up. You know, one of the things that I advocate for loudly as much as I can is produce content. You know, Michael Morris produces good content. I'm a follower of him. Steve produces content. You know, I think the thing that we can all do in this moment is make sure that our collective voices are heard, and that the ideas that we believe in and the ideas that we wake up every day and that motivate us are seen as normal. You know, I spent my, like, if you want to be a change agent in Microsoft and feel like a weirdo, like that's sort of what I was, you know, and I'm finding more and more people say, wait, that's not a crazy idea. You know, that makes a lot of sense now. And so I encourage everyone on this call to produce content and make their voices heard. And John, you do an amazing job of not only curating this group, but you know, putting content out into the world. And that's why you see this set up behind me. Is now I'm going virtual. I'm doing 2 calls on Saturday in Africa of people that are trying to figure out what freelancing means to the African continent, which is a new place for me.
That's awesome, Paul. Well, thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. You know, one of the things when I was getting ready to have this call, I was thinking a lot about you know, this great book that called Platform Revolution. And I think there's a lot of similarities on, you know, two-sided marketplace, Platform Revolution. And Diane, I know you're really connected into, you know, the guys at the Platform Institute. I mean, what, you know, in the context of how do we, you know, think about helping companies adopt this and what's our messaging? What are you learning from the platform side of things?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Good to see you. The Platform Revolution, and really what the Platform Strategy Institute is really focused on, is the absolute inversion of the firm. And this is, it really anchors back, Paul, to what you were talking about, is, you know, thinking outside the box, right? And breaking down some of the old paradigms and norms that businesses have operated on for so long. And by inverting the firm, what you're really talking about is really looking outside of the traditional boundaries of the organization in order to engage an ecosystem of collaborators and partners and people who can drive value for the markets that you choose to serve and the shareholders that choose to invest in you. So basically you're redefining the boundaries of the business, and you're inviting the broader ecosystem of collaborators and contributors in order to drive value for the marketplace customers, if you will. And it's a very fluid, dynamic kind of view on the purpose of the firm. And it basically suggests that you're reaching outside of the boundaries of the company in order to engage expertise, insights, ideas, and solutions, and organize those for delivery to the markets that you choose to serve. And it's, John, to your point, there are so many parallels to kind of what we're solving for here. I think, as I'm listening to this conversation and the previous calls, these are such great conversations. It really struck me that there are a lot of organizations and companies and individuals out there that are really advocating for the deployment and the advancement of technologies, right? Digital strategies. And right at the highest level, what we're about, I think, is really the advocation of the elevation of humanity, right? What we're talking about is empowering and elevating the human experience, regardless of where those the orientation of the employment contract, right? We don't care about the employment relationship. What we care about is the human experience and elevating the ability to engage against your passions, against what inspires you, and against what you're good at. So I think this community, above all, is about the elevation of the human experience.
That's great. That's
yeah.
inspiring for sure. Thanks, Diane. That's awesome. And one of the things that I also, it really clicked in the article I read. Like I said earlier, Dean, your kind of vision of how you guys were solving for specific verticals like AWS. Any other thoughts on kind of that article and how we get the message out to folks and break down those barriers? I mean, obviously verticalization when we cross the chasm is one way, but some of the others in your mind, you're always a good thinker about this stuff.
This is like going back to school. You have to pay attention to the conversation. The professor calls on you.
I saw you kind of sleeping there, so I wanted to make sure that I'm watching everybody.
I'm just going to riff off of this this whole conversation about like organization charts and ripping things out and up from the point of view of the definition of what you're supposed to do every day. That's my favorite thing now. Man, I was going. I recently listened to Jeff Wald, who was the founder of, blanking.
No, you're there.
Work Market.
Thank you. Brian Pena is awake.
Yeah.
Work Market, basically an FMS, got sold to ADP. Who knows where that's going to go? Similar to like TalentNet right now. It's still kind of independent, more associated with Beeline now. But anyhow, Jeff Wald has a little webinar that came out, and it's about his book, which I think is either out or coming out soon. It's called The End of Jobs, The Rise of On-Demand Workers and Agile Corporations. And so like somewhere between the platform revolution, which I completely agree with, Paul's book, which tells you like how to gigify things, Edie Goldberg's the Inside Gig, which describes basically treating employees in a different way and like chunking up their work in a way that kind of Paul talks about, as well as, I'm just going to keep throwing them out here, John Younger's original book, Agile Talent, which says like, hey, treat your employees as well as contractors the same. And now The End of Jobs with Jeff Wald. Like if you take this set of books, squish them all together, in my opinion, it says, do like what I think Google does a little more, which is to say, build teams of experts to get things done. And when the thing's done, disband the team and go do other things. And it isn't, you know, as much as, you know, I'm a TopTal, I'd love everyone to like just replace all like full-time employees with on-demand talent and like we go on our way. It's just not going to happen, right? But properly using your full-time employees, treating them more like the contingent folks and treating the contingent folks more like your full-time employees together with the definition of your purpose being, this is a project, this is your skill, this is how you team together, I think is the answer going forward. And so I get goosebumps just talking about the kind of the confluence of those ideas, the brick wall separating that idea, or stopping that wall, the chasm, stopping that wall from, or that idea from occurring is literally the organizations we built up in enterprises to manage these teams. I mean, you've got HR people who, you know, their primary goal is, you know, more or less to like find talent and then keep them there. And then you got contingent folks who have, at least historically, as Brian Pena has taught everyone, to find the cheapest source of labor. I just threw you under the bus just for fun there, Brian. You know, and so like those things are at odds. And so that's what I'm thinking about right now. And Paul Estes put it well. If I attack the org chart, it's kind of the foundation of the definition of what you're supposed to do every day. If I attack that and make it go away, you know, the top starts spinning out of its pole, and I think that helps shake up the system. So there you go. There's my response.
Yeah, no, I love that. You know, I think it's interesting is when you attack, the other thing that happens when you attack the organizational chart is that you're not attacking a person, right? There's no there's no identity issue. It's not like saying, hey, you're a bad leader, you're a bad, you know, you have a bad HR, you know, strategic plan. It's something that everybody can kind of distance themselves. Hey, Brian, I mean, it sounds like you might need to respond to Dean here. Like,
I am very used to Dean throwing me under the bus on occasion.
Brian's from MBO, so
yeah. This discussion is always so exciting about the future of work, and specifically how we can bring the human element back into the hiring process. I've been intrigued with this evolution of work for a long time, not just here at MBO, but when I was at SIA, really following this industry for a long time. The thing that I really think about and wonder is, obviously we're all, and appropriately so, focusing on the individual experience and the ability of organizations to connect with people on a human level and allowing people to do the work they love the way they want to do it. And I've been evangelist for this cause for a long time, but the thing that I often kind of struggle with is, when does the organization stop being the organization? Every company has a unique culture that comes from the hiring practices, the tribal knowledge that they develop. As we adopt more and more open talent models, when does that culture become diluted? And that's the thing that I really struggle with, is when does that become when does Microsoft stop being Microsoft if 65 to 70% are from disparate sources? Now, maybe that could just be another evolution of culture, which we see as technology and the definition of what it takes to have a job evolves. But that's something I do think about. And then another thing that I think is an interesting thing in reading this article that you referenced, about the need for speed and scale to accommodate massive change. Those are two very different and diametrically opposite sort of elements, is the need to enable mass hiring at scale, but also provide people a connectedness that respects their individuality and their unique talents and skills. And so those just seem at odds to me. And so I think that creates an interesting challenge in the least. And I do, you know, Dean always throws me under the bus because at one point in my life I was in procurement. But, you know, one of my tag phrases is that cheap is expensive that I got from my ex-wife. That was her line. So I will leave it at that. I enjoy these calls tremendously, and I just think it's very inspiring to connect with other people. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. That's really awesome. I'm going to kind of open it up here. Anybody else? I've got some other folks I'd love to call on, but I also want to make sure this is an open forum. So anybody else want to jump in? feel free to. Anybody have
One
thoughts?
challenge, John, that I throw out to this group is I think ideas and perspectives are the starting point, but unless you take the next step of doing an experiment, where I think we have everybody on this call, we have both clients to the providers or the vendors to infrastructure like the MBO to academics, we've everybody on this call. What if we set all of ourselves a little goal that we will end up at least kicking off an experiment or trying something as a result of these conversations? Because I think there's so much power on this conversation that unless you act on it, it's good perspective that we can take back. But I think if you bring together these disparate elements and do something together, I think it could be a lot more powerful to tell a story that we tried something. I think we have all the stakeholders on this call to try.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I mean, that kind of really highlights the fact, though. We've been working with Steve. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of weeks ago, Steve kind of challenged us all to think about the furlough. Like, how do we help companies with furlough? Yeah, and John, I'll call you in just a sec. The idea that could we put together a campaign for all of us to say, hey, Open Talent's here, Open Talent's ready to help, whether it's with companies that are furloughing or employees, or the thing that Balaji started with Hilton and Marriott, or we're here to help on the great rehiring. So we're starting to think that through and working with Diane and Balaji and Steve to come up with an actual idea that we'll present to a lot of you guys. And I think just trying to go out into the world and communicate a consistent strategy, maybe one experiment we might want to run and create that kind of momentum. So more to come on that for sure. We're in the midst of kind of, framing up the brief and understanding kind of what it would cost to do that, get a big PR push and create some assets to do that. But I know, as that comes along, we'll share that with everybody and get everybody's involvement. I know, John, you raised your hand there for a sec. John Healy.
Yeah, I think I was more giving a thumbs up to Balaji on that one, in that I think that there is an aspect of where we can come together as a collective. That's what you labeled this group from the beginning, to do some experiment more as a whole, because I hear a lot of these examples of individuals doing things, how each of us are making ourselves or a small part of what we're doing more efficient. But in the end, what we're talking about is when we say we're going to take the friction out, we're talking about speed to productivity for companies, and we're talking about speed to a paycheck for individuals. And ultimately, if we're going to change society, we have to be able to do that at scale. And so these experiments, while they're important to start in a small way and not try to boil the ocean, they also have to come together. And some aspect of standards amongst the group is an opportunity. And that's, I look at the Andreessen Horowitz, their first piece that really caught my attention was on the passion economy, and kind of renaming the gig economy really about the passion and striking into individuals and getting them to chase the thing that really is going to motivate them to come into work, give them a passion, give them a sense of purpose each and every day. And now as you look at this and you see things coming out, we're going to have to come to some form of standards in some areas, not everywhere, but to start making this easier to get to that speed for productivity for companies, but speed to the paycheck for people, that you can look at someone's background and you can bring them on board or get someone engaged into your organization much more easily than is being done in scale today. So I applaud the idea of experimenting individually, but I also applaud the idea of us coming together as a group and experimenting on some things where we can see how it works across multiple organizations. And I think that's, from my exposure to this group, that's you've got a unique set of people that seem to be willing to align on some things that I think would be foolish not to take advantage of.
Yeah, I love that, John. I think that's a really great idea. And I think it's incumbent on us to, throw some ideas out there and get some alignment with everybody. And there's so many amazing, smart people here on the call. And I think there's a lot of great good we could do together. Does anybody else have something to add?
I think some of the things that I've seen in this conversation, we have a lot that we see in terms of like measuring and celebrating the talent within these ecosystems. I think what we lack in a lot of places is measuring the users, right? It is a two-sided platform, and there are people that become really proficient at using them. So when you think about, like, to me, I often get asked the question of like, well, hey, if I'm using all these experts and, what am I doing? And I always say, well, hey, don't outsource your thinking. Like, you still have to be the decision maker. You can't let the tail wag the dog. And what's needed there, I think we do need to see more of the, the profiles, the ratings, the badges, the certifications on the user side, right? The people that are really plowing the path for a new generation of managers, a new generation of people that get stuff done, and celebrating those people. We're starting to see it. A lot of platforms do things like that. But it hasn't really gone mainstream or viral. If you talk back to the Platform Evolutions book, it hasn't gone viral like the network effect that we really want to see. That will start driving a lot of adoption of our platforms, of our ecosystems. And I will shamelessly point to the person that I think exemplifies this in my world is Dave Messenger. So he runs technology, runs a fairly sizable team, but the majority of his work gets done through the community, right? In fact, like almost every line of code gets developed through the community. And a lot of the direction, we get input from the community, we get input from customers, but Dave puts his intellectual DNA on everything, every decision that gets made, every direction that is going to be taken by the technology organization. You can't outsource that part of it. You can't let go of that, or I think you really do lose, what is the important thing. And I do see it. I see it in a lot of large organizations, especially when they make, giant shifts like, hey, we're going to outsource all of this. You know what I mean? It's like, one organization I remember working with, they outsourced all of their enterprise architecture work. And that was, it was a mistake in the long run. They needed to keep some of that internally. So it's a great discussion. I think that's merited some more talk about what do you leave inside the org, as Steve Radar put it. But I would love to see more people talk about, are we doing anything on the rating, ranking, profile, certifications of the people that use these platforms?
I'm going
That's
to
great.
jump
If I
on.
may,
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think one of the things here too is all of this discussion started in the innovation space because companies were really seeing a need for innovation. And I think there's maybe a shift going on where more engaging of HR departments and HR is going to start reinventing what does that org chart look like? What is it? What is the new acquisition? It used to be all prime contract support. Like, what does that now start to look like? Paul's got some great experience with that. I'm excited on where this is starting to go because I'm actually getting many more requests to talk to HR people, which is kind of exciting. Thanks for letting me jump in, John.
Yeah. No, I was going to call on you anyway.
may
I
I,
think
may I just,
yes, Steve, please.
sorry, John. I just wanted to second what Mike said. I think the single biggest inhibitor to enterprise-wide adoption is really educating the users. I mean, outsourcing. I mean, we have been traditionally an outsourcing organization. That in itself is a big change. Having been through the journey for over 15 odd years, we're still struggling, right? I mean, there's still this discussion about what is in and what is out. Now having to shift to a completely different paradigm here needs a significant amount of education. So if there is something, and I use this catchphrase with Mike very often, make them famous, right? So how do you make them famous? You do need to have some level of certification on the user community. I would urge this group to really think about anybody who uses it. I mean, we use an internal system of giving people medals and badges for, embarking on the journey. But if there is some sort of a formal certification, it will hugely help this journey.
John, one of the things that I did when I was at Staffing in the Industry Analyst prior to joining MBO was we developed a certification for extended workforce practitioners called the CCWP. It's been taught on several continents. About 4,000 people have taken the class. TopTal is part of that, as is MBO. I continue to be involved. So that is a very successful certification process. And you can reach out to Dean or myself if you want to learn more about that particular program. But there is a certification, yeah. It's a two-day course. It's a two-day course covering everything from the elements of strategy to the different sorts of work streams to contract law to the economics of the extended workforce. And it's for the industry as a whole. It's written for users, but it's for the industry as a whole. And I'll share the link in the comments box.
Great. And what's Brian, what's CCWP stand for?
Certified Contingent Workforce Practitioner.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. No, I think that's a good point. And one of the things that came up in my mind, Mike, as you talked in the earlier comments around what is culture in a diverse organization, where does culture lie? What would Microsoft be if everybody was freelance? My experience at Victors and Spoils, it's back to Mike, what you mentioned, this curation layer, right? Like Mess is the guy that it kind of, puts his stamp on everything and kind of makes, the culture of Top Coder one of the, key components of using things in an on mission, on brief kind of way, but also creating, the brand and the culture of Top Coder. And I think there is a way. I think it's different, right? It's different than having everybody at the same place. And so the culture is going to evolve, but I'm not as worried about it in my own experience of going through the Victors and Spoils experience when we had, 25,000 people out in the crowd, but we only had, 15, 20 people in the office. And it still had a really great, culture and a great momentum. Thanks Sajeev for those comments as well. I think that's a really great, Sajeev is from Zurich and has been doing some great work, implementing this stuff. So it's great to hear from somebody that on the ground trying to do this implementation and integration work and build the momentum inside the organization. I know we've got like 5 minutes left. Anybody else want to add anything? Or, I just, for me, I'm so grateful for these conversations. It's always so interesting. And I love the way that, now that we're getting to know each other better, we're willing to jump in and just have a really, fruitful dialogue. So, but anybody else jump in?
I would say I said it in the chat, if anybody would like to produce thoughts or and I'm working with Brian and some others on this call. I have an amazing editorial team. We have a weekly live show that is in pilot right now, but we're going to be extending that. And I have the podcast. And I continue to believe the number one thing, at least that I can do to help inspire and educate large organizations is to provide content and hero make the people within those organizations. So if you have a customer that has a story, if you or someone on your team has a story, I have an amazing team of people that can produce content and help share that with HR leaders and procurement leaders and those personas. So please reach out. I put my information, or you can find me on LinkedIn if I'm not already polluting your daily LinkedIn feed. I'm a lot of HR people reach out, a lot of people at large companies reach out to learn more about the experience, and we're reaching them via content. So happy to be a resource.
Yeah, that's awesome. Paul, you're doing such an amazing job. And I definitely second or maybe third the comments that Mike, and Diane just put up that, Paul's definitely becoming a hero maker. It's really great to see his content that's out in the world and making a difference for all of us. Anybody else? No thoughts?
Yeah, John, I'll just weigh in, just something we maybe want to talk about for next time. It's interesting to me that even Airbnb now is offering an experience as part of their overall mission. So if we thought of offering experiences, not jobs, and start to make that a cultural shift, I think we see a lot more movement towards what we're talking about here. And if organizations understood the idea of an experience as being what somebody wanted to come and do, that would get to that passion cycle we want to be able to do. I don't think we've really spoken about the experience economy in this context very much, but I'd like to talk more about that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great idea because, for me, that really speaks to the cultural element, right? Like a lot of us love the place we work. because of the experience, right? Because of the people and the experience part of it, not maybe always because of the work that we're doing. So
could you get an experience in company A while you're at company B, and then merge those experiences in some way differently, like they do with doctors, like they do with other things?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Anything else? Anything else to share? Balaji, any last comments? I mean, you always are good at synthesizing things. You know, thanks for the great provocative comments earlier to think about doing stuff together.
No, I think where I got the idea was I'll post, maybe we'll send a follow-up email with a Wall Street Journal podcast around how a group of scientists came together and they pretty much got the ear of the administration and of governors, and they actually started moving things around. So getting, running experiments about what works faster, which drugs work better for COVID than the others. It was a group of us, like us, that got onto calls and then did stuff together. So I just want us to think about what happens between calls and how does this community become more valuable by making that change that is being discussed on the call. So that's, and I think there's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a call to action, right? Let's figure out how to, not just talk, but do. So many smart people on these calls, and I really, really appreciate everybody. As we try to sort through, what the action is, I like I said, we're working on a brief, but I'll start getting stuff out to everybody that's on these calls. And again, anybody on the call that wants to participate in that, please let me know. There's so many talented people here, so much experience and so much, thoughtfulness. So really, really love this group. Love you guys. And thanks again for another amazing call. Ty, thanks again for helping me kick this thing off. Always great to do that. So, and good to see you guys.
Happy to do it. Great to see everybody.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.
Right, thanks again.
Stuff team.
Ciao.